Hello, everybody. We are glad to participate in ICOET Online Conference 2021 and to present the global strategy for ecologically sustainable transport and other linear infrastructure. I'm Lazaros Georgiadis. I'm making this presentation on behalf of the International Working Group, which was coordinated by INE and supported by the International Coalition of Organizations like the conferences of ANET, ICLEI, ICOET, and organizations of WWF and IUCN, the Connectivity Conservation Specialist Group, and the Transport Working Group. We know that the future is not so bright related with fragmentation of landscape and habitats in our planet. You can see that a lot of places are pulled black under the press of development of transport and other linear infrastructure. And maybe the most obvious problem is the problem of the roadkills, which is connected with the safeness of drivers, people, but also the wildlife and animals. But the real and not so obvious problem is habitat fragmentation. And this is obvious or not only for us, only to one species, to Homo sapiens. So we need to make action, we need to undertake our responsibilities and to find solutions towards the problems of fragmentation of the natural habitats and the landscapes. For this, in ICOET 2015, we started to create a coalition, initially with WWF, USA, and ANET, the Australian Network of Ecology and Transportation. But gradually, other conferences, other organizations came as ICOET, as ICLEI, the African Conference of Linear Infrastructure and Ecology, and CBIT. And a strong international working group created with colleagues from all over the planet, as from Europe, Africa, from Asia, Australia, North America, and South America. This effort started in 2015 in the framework of the EGLI project. The EGLI was a project towards developing of international guidelines for ecologically friendly linear infrastructure. And the report of this project, as a first result, was a report with the title Towards Developing Sustainable Linear Transportation Infrastructure Globally, Recommendations for Priority of International Actions. The report includes the evaluation of the recognition of the threat of fragmentation in 5 international conventions, like Bonn Convention, CBD, Paris Convention, the Carpathian Convention, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Also, the report includes the development of an international debate of a global sustainable linear transport infrastructure needs, including special workshop in international conferences on ecology and transportation, as in IUCN in 2016, in ICOET 2017, and INE 2018. The report presented in CBD 2018 and sent it to the CBD Secretariat and can be found in the link that is described here. The recommendations for the Convention of Biological Diversity and future actions included, first of all, to spread the message of INE 2018 Conference Declaration, which is connected with the completion of 15 years of the National Defragmentation Project of the Netherlands. So this message was clear: don't fragment the natural habitat of our planet. Also, we talk a lot about creating basic concepts of tools that we have to use in our effort and our, let's say, campaigns. These concept tools include the genetic isolation and the wildlife mortality, the habitat fragmentation, the ecological connectivity, the green and gray infrastructure, the concept of sustainability, and of course the mitigation hierarchy as a basic concept of solutions. Also, one of the recommendations was to develop an international strategy for sustainable transport infrastructure with concrete principles, objectives, and an action plan. And actually, this is what we did. And finally, more general, is to support the multidisciplinary cooperation between sectors, countries, and continents. Actually, this is, let's say, translated in the action plan of our strategy. And all these recommendations presented in 2018 in Egypt to the CBD COP14. How we develop the strategy? We start first of all to work together after the decision, after a special workshop that we have organized in ICOET 2009 in South Africa. And then the working group created and was coordinated by INE. The strategy developed in 4 steps. The first was a search about bibliography, literature on stakeholders' engagement. The step was the determination of the aim of the objectives of the strategy. The third was to identify and to make a map, to make a mapping of stakeholders. And at the end, the 4th step was the creation of the action plan with a description of actions per stakeholder. The aim of the strategy is to define a roadmap on the effective engagement of all the different stakeholders as important and crucial players in developing sustainable linear infrastructure globally. The strategic objectives of the strategy are actually the basic concepts that we have analyzed until now, with the following, let's say, logical framework. The genetic isolation and the wildlife mortality is an objective as a main problem. The habitat fragmentation, the land degradation as the main cause. The ecological and landscape connectivity as the main aim. The green and gray infrastructure as the main crossing point in conflict areas. The sustainability as the great objective. And the mitigation hierarchy as the main framework of solution. And we try to set up a basic principles for framework of basic principles for sustainable linear infrastructure, which are the following 12. Strong policy and legal framework, strategic planning, ecosystem approach, any case a unique case, multidisciplinary and cross-sector cooperation, civil society involvement, polluters pay principle, long-life effective maintenance, resilience to climate change, adaptable infrastructure habitats, environmental supervision, culture of learning. Towards mapping the stakeholders, we identified 4 concrete roles. The first is to be fundamentally collaborated. The second is to be involved. The third role of stakeholder is we have a consultancy role, and the fourth is to have an informative role. The actions of the action plans was identifying that they can be focused on 4 levels and geographical scale for their implementation. The levels are the policy and the strategy, the planning, environmental impact assessment, the implementation, the management, and the education, awareness, consultation, and communication. Policy and strategy has to be implemented actions in international scale, in continental, regional, and national and local scale. Planning, environmental impact assessment activities can be included in national scale and local scale. Implementation and management activities are activities for the local scale implementation, as well as education, awareness, consultation, and communication. And this is how is the action plan developed. The action plan includes 4 different columns. It's a long table of stakeholders, of actions, of timetable, and divided in 2 periods of the first 5 years and the second 5 years of this decade. And finally, the 4th column, the output, describing what we are waiting to see after the implementation of each of the activity. And if you want to see the mapping of stakeholders, you can see some examples. For example, in the policy and strategy level and the international scale, we can see international conventions, United Nations, G20, and international banks. In the policy and strategy in the national scale, also we can see international organizations for infrastructure development, as a pair, for example, international organization on natural conservation, as we mentioned, IUCN and WWF, and the continental networks on infrastructure and ecology with international activities like ICOET, INI, ANET, ACLI, and CBIF. In the level of implementation and management in local scale, you can see stakeholders like landowners, constructors and operators, research institutes and organizations, civil society with public and NGOs, and supervising public authorities and services. Also, defining the sustainable linear infrastructure, we spend a lot of time basing on the first definition that we saw in the Carpathian Convention. Finally, the sustainable linear infrastructure can be defined as linear infrastructure which limits negative impacts on land use, landscapes, and ecosystems, and is constructed in such a way that minimizes animal roadkills and ensures ecological connectivity while limiting fragmentation of the natural environment. Limits pollution, noise production, emissions, and waste within the planet's ability to absorb them towards minimizing its impact on global climate change. Is safe, adaptable, and resilient to climate change. Uses renewable resources at or below their rates of generation. Uses not renewable resources at or below the rates of development of renewables substitutes. Respects the local societies and their cultures in the areas intersected by its alignment. And finally, make people feel safe and happy, enjoying the aesthetic experience of beautiful sceneries, integrated linear infrastructure into landscapes as much as possible. And the final proposal of the strategy estimated that the fragmentation of nature is a critically important threat for biodiversity, is to create an international observatory for monitoring the fragmentation status globally, or actually to the development of sustainable linear infrastructure. And this can be led by the United Nations or the CBD or the combination with another organizations and the support of all the organizations of our international working group. The global strategy can be found in this link, the INI website. Thank you for going together. Please for your questions.